All
call.
right.
I'll see you call. No big deal. Yeah. So we'll do call-ins. What's your take on us electing Biden as president? Take your time with it.
Man, it's a damn shame is all I can say. You know, at the end of the day, that we're here in LA, people spent 6 weeks in a row, every day. I was counting day in and day out, 6 weeks in a row. We're marching in the street with two main demands. One, criminal justice overhaul, not just reform, criminal justice overhaul, let's call it. And number two, systemic racism, getting at systemic racism. But let's go at number one, because it was that knee on George Floyd's neck that precipitated the 6 weeks of marching.
Yes.
All right.
Yeah.
In the video, the video that went around. So criminal justice was at the top of the agenda. And the over-incarceration of Black men, the new Jim Crow, all of that was front and center. You know, supporting the police state, all of that was front and center. So what do the Democrats do? They take Joe Biden, one of the architects of racialized mass incarceration himself. Joe Biden's name is on the 94 crime bill. His name is on it, literally, right? There's all kinds of tapes of him saying that Reagan wasn't draconian enough, or Bush wasn't draconian enough, or, you know, Clinton even wasn't draconian enough. And when he was asked about when the protesters said defund the police while he was running in the primary, what was his response to defund the police? $300 million more for the police, he said, you know, for community training, but $300 million more for it. I mean, it's hard to imagine a clearer slap in the face to all the people protesting than to put the architect of mass incarceration himself. And I have this in the very introduction to my book. I wrote my book long before we knew who the nominee was going to be or who the vice president was. And I singled out two people as being, you know, real illustrations of what got us into mass incarceration, racialized mass incarceration, and new Jim Crow. I say Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Those are the two I mentioned. And then I start going into Kamala Harris's record, which is woeful. I mean, we're talking about somebody who literally came up with a law, supported a law, boosted, and then prosecuted under it that made criminals out of parents whose 16, 17-year-old children were truant, weren't in school enough. You know, I've been 16 or 17. Try telling me what I'm going to do. Now you're going to throw my parent in a cage because of what a 16 or 17-year-old is doing? You know, but that is the kind where Kamala Harris is coming from as a DA and as an attorney general, not holding any corrupt DAs accountable in her reign as attorney general, calling herself the top cop, mocking people who are talking about, you know, schools rather than prisons, literally mocking them, right? So, you know, here's where I do. I think people were celebrating after, many people I know were celebrating after the election. They weren't so much celebrating Biden as celebrating Trump's ouster. They were celebrating getting rid of Trump. That was something worth celebrating, but not celebrating. Biden said in a closed room before the election, you heard it, that to his donors, nothing fundamentally will change. Remember that statement? Nothing fundamentally will change. Well, saying nothing fundamentally, you want to take us back to where we were before 2016? Well, before 2016 wasn't so good. Down here in LA, for example, where we have the fiercest expression of structural violence in the nation, Skid Row, the highest concentration of houseless people in the nation here on Skid Row, you walk down there and you look to your left and right, 75% of those faces are Black, not people of color faces, Black, right? The status quo before 2016 wasn't so great for those people. It hasn't gotten any better. Those black people down there in Skid Row are like those blacks in the 9th Ward standing on those rooftops with the water up to their neck, right? They're in that kind of distress, but we don't give a damn about them because, well, they're just more black bodies, you know, like in the 9th Ward. You know, and I have in my book all kinds of psychological literature about that explains that relative indifference to the plight of black victims in crisis situations. There's a whole lot of psychological underpinnings to it. But at the end of the day, we all we got.
Mm. He called in. Terrence, can you hear him now?
Yeah, I can hear everything.
Can you hear him?
I can hear him.
Okay, great, perfect. Go ahead.
I'll start again. How you doing, Professor? What's up, Fred?
Hi.
How you feel?
Hey, no disrespect to the deacon, but when it comes to religion, you know what I'm saying, we as black folk have gone through a multitude of different religions over the centuries. You know what I'm saying? Some of us, you know, went from ancestors went from traditional African religion to Muslim to Christian. Some of us were beaten into Christianity here. Some of us were beaten in Islam over there. When it comes to God, not everybody has the same God. God is different to everybody. That's why when talking about religion, I tell people I don't know what your God says, because maybe my God is different to me than he is to you. Everybody doesn't have the same religion. Much respect to the deacon, but everybody doesn't have the same feel on it. And when it comes down to religion, and you talk about the social issues like the LGBT community and all that stuff, you know, the way I look at it is, I don't have a heaven or hell to put you in. So as long as you're not affecting me in my life and my household, and you're not affecting me putting food on my table, you can believe what you want. I really don't care, because I ain't got nowhere to put you, because I'm not this malevolent being. Now, we was talking about the word nigger. There was a poem, "Niggas in the White House," that came about when shoot, who was it? Yeah, I forgot the person's name that fast. I put it in the chat. When he invited Booker T. Washington to the White House, and then it came about again when another president, I don't know if it was Hoover or somebody, invited some African Americans there for tea. Prior to that, there was I believe it might have been an article of why the nigger is not fit to vote, and that came about because Ulysses S. Grant got the overwhelming black vote. And so when it comes to the word, nigger and politics, there's a long history in it. Don Cheadle came out and said that Donald Trump said to his father, said to a friend while they were golfing, how you like having sex with that nigger girl? And that was Don Cheadle's words. You can look it up. My question to you, Professor, is how do we, reconcile? Because and another issue is, I hear it a lot when people say we're not our grandparents, and they got T-shirts out saying, I'm not my grandfather. I'll do this to you, whatever. And to that I said, no, we are not our grandparents, our ancestors. Some of them are still sitting in prison right now for the things that they did in the 60s.
What's the question, TV? What's the question?
I'm saying, what is the professor's, outlook on how, it's been that word been perpetuated all through politics for the last 100 years?
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. The word has been used as a sharp instrument. It's been used to cut and to wound and to lacerate. No question about it, right? And it's still used that way. When Chris Rock says, I love black people, but I hate niggas, he's using it just that way, to dehumanize, to, to demonize, to otherize, right? It certainly has that historical meaning, and that meaning is still among us. It's still with us, right? But it also has taken on an additional meaning, a very different meaning, an antithetical meaning even to that original meaning, right? And one of the things that a lot of white students and non-black people in audiences that I'm addressing, one of the first questions I always get from them is, why, Professor, why is it that black people get to monopolize that word? Why is it that only black people get to use that word and others who try to use it, like Bill Maher? You remember when he used it and he, put his tail between his legs and apologized and brought Ice Cube on and tried to cover up because he was worried about losing his job. That's how serious it still is. People aren't playing around with it, right? It is a third rail, right? And comedians don't mess with it. A lot of people don't mess with it. And so a lot of these white students and others will raise their hands and say, why do black people get to monopolize that word, right? And the reason they're saying that is they recognize that it is a valuable cultural property, right? When Kanye West adds to his couplet, I ain't saying she's a gold digger, but she ain't messing with no broke. When he adds that to that couplet, he's added hundreds of thousands of sales, right? It's that kind of cultural property. Bill Maher would love to sprinkle some N-words around in his punchlines. He'd love to be edgy, like that, right? Because it's a valuable cultural property. White people would love to appropriate it like they've appropriated a lot of other black cultural properties, but they don't get to. They haven't gotten to, and they don't like it, right? There have been a number of black folks who have taken that historically vile word and found new possibilities in it. But only black people can find those new possibilities because only we are members of the targeted group. Only we have been historically targeted by that epithet. So only we can use it with irony as historical targets of it. I have, years ago, back in the early 90s, there was a theory that grew up in the academy called queer theory, right? And it was developed by LGBTQ folks, because even though back then queer was an epithet, they used it because they could. They were their historical targets of it. Sure. There's a magazine. There are a couple magazines out now with BITCH in the title, right? But they're feminist magazines. They're by women. For women oftentimes. And so they, as members of a group that's been historically targeted with that word, they can use it in a way I can't. I'm not going to try to, frankly, to use that word anything like they're using it, because I, have a lot of male privilege, so it's recognizing that, that it has the N-word has been a word that has historically wounded, but in the hands of black artists and writers, it can also be a scalpel that sutures the places where blood flows.
All right, sir. Well, I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna jump off. When it comes to the N word, I think black folk, we done FUBU'd that word, so we done made it for us by us. So we have a thing of taking things that was meant for our bad and turning them to our good, and that's what we did with that word. But it's not so much for our good either. We shouldn't use it either. But I guess we attempted to turn the tables. And to Reggie Owens, no, I'm not mad at the brother for using the hairstyle. Good night.
And is there such thing as a black Republican or a black Democrat?
Yeah, there certainly are people who are very much involved in the parties, have been elected as Democrats, have been elected as Republicans, and so embrace those party labels themselves. I worry that, the Democratic parties takes us for granted because, they know we don't have anywhere to go. That's right. And and the Republican Party is still doing what the Republican Party does. So I wish I could say, there was a third party that I could point to and say, not only can you be a Black Republican or a Black Democrat, but you can be a Black member of this other party that isn't always the lesser of available evils that you have to settle for, right? Which is what we often wind up doing rather than, going for what I saw here in LA was jaw dropping. You saw the people get in the streets, forget the national level. I'm very, very disappointed there, but the local level, I am in a state of awe.
I'll bring you in.
At the local level, you saw the protests in the streets turn into the election of George Gascon as the new progressive prosecutor in the largest DA jurisdiction in the nation. You had Measure J, which was basically a defund the police measure that most Angelenos supported, which takes 10% of the county's unrestricted funds, which is $8.8 to $10 billion a year, takes 10% of that and puts it into alternatives to incarceration. That's, in other words, defund the police. That's what that boils down to in so many words, in practical effect. So I've seen the power of the protesters really make a difference at the ballot box when it came to these local elections. And though that gives me a lot of hope, even when I feel pessimistic about, kind of how we've been treated at the top of the ticket, I'm just in awe of what the grassroots organizers were able to accomplish at the local level.